The United States, United Kingdom, China, and India are robbing Africa's riches to power artificial intelligence and uphold the veneer of green energy. From President Biden to Indian billionaires, extraction of hundreds of billions of dollars worth of copper is leaving countries like Zambia to suffer from the deadly mining industry and financial and environmental impacts that affects the country's children. Consider it a new type of colonialism. There are just too many AI programs to run, too many tech gadgets to manufacture, and too much money to be made. Joshua Frank is an American investigative journalist, co-editor of Counterpunch, co-host of Counterpunch Radio, and author of Atomic Days, the untold story of the most toxic place in America, writing Robbing Africa's Riches to Save the Climate and Power AI on October 11th, 2024. I'll read an abridged version. Half a century after Portugal's colonial control of Angola ended, neocolonialism is now sinking its hooks into Lobito. Its port and the Benguela Railway have become a nucleus of China's and the Western world's efforts to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy in our hot new world. If capitalist interests continue to drive this transition, the amount of critical minerals needed to power the global future remains unfathomable. 3 billion tons of metals will be required, between 35 and 194 massive copper mines by 2050. Unsurprisingly, most minerals are in Latin America and Africa. Worse yet, near indigenous lands, which means the most vulnerable are at the most risk of being impacted in a deeply negative fashion by future mining and related operations. Global revenues from copper, nickel, cobalt, and lithium are estimated to total $16 trillion over the next 25 years. Sub-Saharan Africa alone is believed to contain 30% of the world's total critical mineral reserves. It's estimated that the Congo is responsible for 70% of global cobalt output and approximately 50% of the globe's reserves. As for copper, Africa has two of the world's top producers, with Zambia accounting for 70% of the continent's output. This transition won't be pretty. In 2024, China committed $4.5 billion to African lithium mines and $7 billion to copper and cobalt mining infrastructure. In the Congo, China controls 70% of the mining sector. Having lagged behind, the U.S. is now looking to make up ground. In 2023, Secretary Blinken quietly signed an agreement with Angola, Zambia, the Congo, and the EU to launch the Lobito Corridor project. There wasn't much news coverage, but almost 50 years after Portugal was forced out of Angola, the West was back, offering a $4 billion commitment and assessing the need to update the infrastructure first built by colonizers. President Biden called the Lobito project the biggest U.S. rail investment in Africa ever. Both Africa and the U.S., Biden was careful to imply, would reap the benefits. Of course, that's precisely the rhetoric we can expect when interests are intent on acquiring resources. If this were about oil or coal, questions would undoubtedly be raised. Yet, with the fight against climate change providing cover, few are considering the geopolitical ramifications and fewer the impacts of massively increased mining on the continent. The bloody conditions cobalt miners in the Congo endure, many children laboring against their will for days with little sleep under excruciatingly abusive conditions. The dreadful story is the same in Zambia. A report by Human Rights Watch exposed the wretchedness inside Chinese-owned mines, 18-hour workdays, unsafe environments, anti-union activities, and fatal accidents. There is little reason to believe it's different in Western-owned operations. A miner injured while working for a Chinese company told HRW, "You'll be fired if you refuse." The main accidents are rock falls, but you also have electrical shocks, people hit by mining trucks, falling from platforms. When we were working, a rock fell and hit my arm. It broke to the bone coming out. An explosion killed 51 workers in 2005. 10 workers died in 2018 at an illegal copper extraction site. In 2019, 3 mine workers burned to death. A landslide killed more than 30 in 2023. Despite horrors, there's a rush to extract ever more copper in Zambia. As of 2022, 5 copper mines were operating and 8 more in production. With new U.S.-backed mines, Washington believes Zambian copper will end up in green energy goods in the West. Cobalt Metals in Berkeley worked to locate the next big mine operation in Zambia using AI. Backed by billionaires Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, Cobalt bills itself committed to the green energy transition. It will take an immense amount of energy to support their artificially intelligent world. A recent report estimates that electricity usage by AI data centers will increase significantly. As of 2022, centers were already utilizing 460 terawatt hours, but are on pace to 1,050 by the middle of the decade. Europe's total energy consumption in 2023 was around 2,700. Anyone in the renewable space in the Western world is looking for copper and cobalt, fundamental to making electric vehicles, Chief Executive of Cobalt in Zambia explained. The shortest route is Lobito. Makai wasn't beating around the bush. The critical minerals won't end up in Zambia. They are bound for Western consumers alone. Cobalt's CEO House is also honest. I'm a capitalist. In 2024, Cobalt hit the jackpot. Its AI located the largest copper find in more than a decade. Once running, it could produce 300,000 tons of copper annually. The cash will soon flow. As of late summer 2024, 1 ton of copper cost more than $9,600. Cobalt has gone all in, spending $2.3 billion to get the Zambian mine operable by 2030. The value of copper that has left Zambia is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Hold that figure in your mind and then look around yourself in Zambia. Not only has Zambia relinquished the benefits, but its people will be left to suffer the local mess that will result. KCM is the largest ore producer in Zambia, ripping out 2 million tons of copper a year. With a long record of worker and environmental abuses, KCM runs Zambia's largest open pit mine. In 2019, British-based Vedanta Resources acquired an 80% stake. Vedanta is run by Indian billionaire Agarwal, known as the Metal King. Leaving in trails of toxic waste in India, Agarwal's alumina mines polluted the lands of the indigenous Konj tribes. In Zambia, his copper mines wrecked farmlands and waterways that supplied fish and water to thousands. The Kafue River runs through the copper belt, carrying cadmium, lead, and mercury from KCM's mine. In 2019, thousands of Zambian villagers sued Vedanta, claiming poison and insurmountable damage to their land. The British Supreme Court found Vedanta liable. There were stomach issues from children. Children drink from the river. That's how they live, so they'll get diseases. Despite that legal victory, little has changed. Environmental regulations remain weak and nearly impossible to enforce, which leaves KCM to regulate themselves. A 2024 Zambian bill seeks to create a regulatory body, but the industry pushed back. It's unclear if it will ever be signed into law. Even if the law does pass, it may have little real-world impact. The climate to the billionaire mine owners and Western accomplices will remain an afterthought, as well as justification to exploit Africa's critical minerals. Consider it a new type of colonialism, with a green capitalist veneer. There are just too many AI programs to run, too many tech gadgets to manufacture, and too much money to be made. Now, this is a dense article, and I encourage you to read it in full. These are a few key takeaways that I wanted to share. First, the evil of colonialism has not disappeared. It has only been renamed. Joshua Franks describes it as neocolonialism. Colonialism is defined as the policy or practice of a wealthy or powerful nation's maintaining or extending its control over other countries, especially in establishing settlements or exploiting resources. Colonialism in the modern sense began with the Age of Discovery or exploration, led by the Portuguese, who became increasingly expansionist after the conquest of Ceuta, northern Africa, in 1415. Neocolonialism is defined as the policy or practice of a wealthy or powerful nation in extending its influence into a less developed one, especially in exploiting that nation's resources. The transition of the Lobito corridor from Portugal's reign to them being kicked out almost 50 years ago after a 27-year civil war, to now the US and China coming in less than 50 years later, represents a nearly uninterrupted drive for colonial and neocolonial exploitation and a system of dispossession where colonial empires extract resources to benefit the world's wealthiest countries and individuals, taking the treasures from countries and regions where they should have much more infrastructure, technology, and quality of of life resources in exchange for the treasure they are giving away, but they have none to show for their exploitation. And not only this, but neocolonialism is even more insidious than it has been in history, especially when President Joe Biden can publicly state that both Africa and the US will reap the benefits of a partnership or coalition, when in reality, the West is taking the gold treasure for fractions of its value and selling it on the international market to multi-billion-dollar conglomerates for lifetime benefits. Second, the United States, China, India, and billionaires including Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates have made a declaration that their interest in human rights, labor rights, and the protection of vulnerable populations is zero. This should not be news to many who are aware of working conditions in these countries and corporations, but in case you needed any further verification, you can add this stamp to the collection. What are the value of labor rights in the United States when the author of Cobalt Red, Siddharth Kara, exposes the truth of the bloody conditions of cobalt miners in the Congo in their book? From the children laboring against their will for days on end with little sleep and under excruciatingly abusive conditions. We have to realize that the United States citizen's struggle, or a citizen of wherever you are listening to this message, is not only for the working and middle class, but the upper class and any class that is below the sliver of the 0.01% that truly control the money supply, the law and policies and the infrastructure that runs modern technology and telecommunications, but also anyone that truly cares about living in a society where they themselves won't also be exploited. Imagine the havoc the US, the West, and China are wreaking on the global South while selling you the veneer of progress because we are giving electric vehicles and we're using solar panels when the same colonial tactics are being used not only to exploit other human beings, but exploit you for your lack of knowledge and your replaceability to play a role in this system, taking advantage of people and children that have barely lived long enough on this planet to speak their native tongue, tired and abused. In Congo, in Zambia, and the African countries that Secretary Blinken and President Biden worked tirelessly to sign a deal with quietly at the G20 meeting in India for the Lobito Corridor project, the Benguela Railway, to extract profits of treasure for folks who will barely eat food while they fill themselves up with dollars and calories. The G20, or Group of 20, is an annual intergovernmental meeting comprising of 19 sovereign countries, the European Union, and the African Union, working to address major issues related to the global economy, including international financial stability, climate change mitigation, and sustainable development, with heads of state and heads of government. Notice who's in the room making these decisions and who's excluded: the workers and citizens with blood on their hands and the minds. Third, the propaganda of the United States empire is an infectious disease that cannot be cured without the purging of greenwashing, dissecting the manipulative words of our world leaders, and taking matters into our own hands as citizens to create the safe labor conditions of our future that no longer exploit the many for the few. Frank makes an incredibly important point when he says that if the biggest investment in Africa ever was about oil or coal, there would undoubtedly be questions raised from citizens in the United States and globally. But because this isn't an oil deal and almost a backdoor way of getting American interests into a country for their most valuable resources by improving the colonial railway and massively increasing mining on the continent while telling people in the US that green energy is good for the environment, in reality, we're just exploiting more and more of the earth at the expense of the global South and the planet's most vulnerable people and children. The propaganda has to be strong to allow this because this is a disturbing image that the US would not want to grapple with. Instead, people just want to see the numbers in their bank accounts increase. They just want more tech gadgets, the newest electronic device, without knowing that blood is on their hands from the production of the most vulnerable humans that look just like them. And not only this, but the propaganda is damaging to our environment. If in 2025, the amount of energy used at AI data centers are expected to use will increase to nearly half of the total energy consumption of the entire continent of Europe in 2023, the biggest deception is happening right before your eyes. These are the moments people will look back on in history and say, where were you when this incredible damage happened in the world? Were you aware and did you work to share the truth and build community outside of empire, or were you a silent participator in the empire's atrocities? Fourth, Zambia is already in a precarious position when it comes to sustaining itself under the global financial system, or capitalism, which forces them to trade resources for paper money instead of other means of community mutual aid outside of capitalism. Having one product, copper, account for 70% of your revenue is incredibly unstable because it gives imperial powers the ability to manipulate and leverage that one asset against Zambia. This presents a prime opportunity for exploitation or control of the country by other empires through extortion or other means of forcing you to engage with other empires how they would like so they can squeeze you dry at the end of the day. This, for one, is many reasons why I'm an advocate of abandoning the money and central banking system in favor of a mutual aid system where communities lean on each other and supply what we can for each other and help build community and solidarity instead of a competition-based system of exploitation where people's own bodies become commodified or turned into goods to be traded and sold. And a complete lack of care ensues, leading to situations like children working in unspeakable conditions. It's pretty clear that if Africa has treasure, there is no reason that resources cannot be provided for them for the work they do. And even if they weren't doing work, even if they ran out of copper, they should still have the ability to have food and resources in a world with incredible amounts of surplus and waste that is all just being funneled to the top 0.01% in the world's richest, who are able to exploit without care, damaging not only our planet, but our communities as well. Finally, this is also evidence that green energy is not a solution to climate, as already shown, but again, the solution is community and mutual aid where we sustainably share resources and don't have our neighbors starving and exploited while others sit in their homes and throw away food every day that others could eat, or build technology that others can't use. The answer to climate change is not only end greed on a personal level, but more importantly, corporate greed and imperialism, which is defined as the extension of a nation's authority by territorial acquisition or by the establishment of economic and political dominance over other nations. This is most clearly seen beyond Zambia as well. In the Congo, where China controls 70% of the mining sector, this is neocolonialism and capitalist exploitation in its purest form. Congo owns less than 1/3 of their own valuable mining sector. The second subpoint here is that the US, China, and European Union's control of the Lobito Corridor is arguably more important in colonizing Africa than the ownership of the goods themselves, even though the Africans don't completely own that either. The Lobito Corridor is the gate to the international market. One doesn't need to own the phones, but the communication services the phones run on that charge the users. One doesn't need to own the goods, but if they own the ports, they can control everything in the market. This is what is also happening recently with large private equity firms like BlackRock buying up ports with billionaires in the first quarter of 2025. Swiss billionaire Gianluigi Aponte's shipping company has spent more than $40 billion investing in everything from ships and ports to hospitals and high-speed rail. And that was before teaming up with BlackRock to buy 43 ports from Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing's conglomerate for $23 billion. Fifth, the contrast between the dirty, death-tolling mines in Zambia and the cobalt metals headquarters in Berkeley, California, above trendy bars and restaurants displays a powerful form of cognitive dissonance, as well as AI washing, like whitewashing or greenwashing for AI, to cover up the atrocities borne by those in the global south. Cognitive dissonance, or the mental conflict that occurs when beliefs are contradicted by new information and people choose to reject, explain away, or avoid the new information to preserve stability in their conceptions of the world and themselves, is on display as U.S. citizens reconcile the colonialist harm done in order to run all the beautiful parts of their country. Their AI programs, to get their fancy tea that they can pre-order on their phone, to get their text message on their Apple Watch, and to experience a virtual reality with Meta glasses or Apple headsets. It is the child in the room in Ursula K. Le Guin's The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. In a basement, under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in a cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. In the room, a child is sitting. They all know it is there, all the people of Omelas. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know that it has to be there. They all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. to the people of cobalt metals, to the people of Berkeley, of California, the United States, to politicians and people around the world, we must be the ones who walk away from Omelas. 6. The politicians, organizations, and corporate billionaires that are making life and death situations are insulated from the crimes against humanity they are committed. The exploitation of labor of people of all ages for the purpose of profit and abysmal human rights violations is just a byproduct of their success and the endless tech gadgets provided to the world. Human rights itself is a term that I find extremely discomfort with and should be reframed or abandoned for the following reason. Merriam-Webster defines a right as something to which one has a just claim, such as the power or privilege to which one is justly entitled. The ability to live without exploitation, abuse, access to clean water, access to clean air, these things aren't privileges, but are products of being human already inherent in the earth that provides naturally its inhabitants abundantly. And an animal should not have to suffer from these conditions while having to go to a state-designated authority to petition for redress of harms, to ask kindly that their water isn't poisoned. No, if the factory has an immediate consequence of poisoning the water, that factory should have the immediate consequence of ceasing to exist, just as someone who faces a threat naturally defends themselves, not put down their guard and allow abuse and then walk away with their limp body to another person to ask for a process whereby the situation could have been avoided if they had the tools and human force to stop it earlier. This is why we must stand up for our neighbors. The legal systems, the governments, and the corporations are self-interested even though they purport to be for the average person. The government, law enforcement, and corporations blockade environmental resources that should be shared, and they put it behind a paywall or a work wall where you can't get what nature naturally provides. And then they can poison and contaminate your rivers and lakes and say it's for the benefit of human progress. The article mentions that large organizations are the ones making these decisions as well. The World Economic Forum, the International Energy Forum, and the G20 meeting, with no pushback from Secretary Blinken, President Biden, or President Lourenco, and the attempt to hold people accountable through Human Rights Watch and International Energy Agency. 7th, this might be the most important point. Because of the system of capitalism, we are all the perpetrators of these crimes, effectively tied to each other in the negative outcomes the system creates by simply participating in seemingly innocuous tasks like buying a loaf of bread or buying shelter. We are keeping our neighbors suffering and strengthening the central banking currency system that is creating the suffering and damage of the global south and the earth itself. It's times like this where we need to not only remind ourselves of the fact that money itself has no value, but that we need to build new systems of mutual aid for each other so that human rights isn't an afterthought that sometimes gets considered, but is baked into the communities and relationships we have. The simple fact of the matter is that the earth provides resources that all humans can enjoy. There is not scarcity in nature, but rather tremendous waste in a capitalist system where a restaurant can throw away food while someone outside sits starving. Even the most amazing advancements of this world, and with the technology we have today, we can guarantee access and delivery for things like medical care and protection from natural disasters because we are already living in a large interconnected web, just not one of mutual aid. Humanity needs to take the steps to create the system as soon as possible. The current system we live in has left the world broken and uneducated. Not only food and essential resources, but knowledge itself is hidden beyond paywalls in ivory tower universities divided into discrete subjects taught over years. So we can only have a certain amount of doctors, only a certain amount of farm workers, and only a certain amount of technologists because capitalism means only a few will survive because they will need to be someone's boss and extract value by exploiting their employees. In a world of mutual aid, knowledge is one of the largest shared commodities because instead of competition, where I try to hide information from you to take advantage of you, hide solutions and make you my servant, we all serve each other in a mutual network of aid and work to improve and account for all lives. Not just the ones who have forced the world into their bank's currency exchange, not just the ones like the Western Empire who sends coups to destroy other governments to maintain power and lie to citizens about motives and tell the people that they have the power while using force against them when they don't follow the agreements that have been set out. This is why we must work together. I think it was powerful when Joshua Frank quoted the CEO of Cobalt, Kurt House, who said, "I don't need to be reminded again that I'm a capitalist." This shouldn't just make you upset, but hopefully makes Kurt himself upset because Kurt knows the truth of what goes on in these mines. He sees the child in the basement of Omelas, the same way I wake up every day and know the truth of what goes on when I get bananas from the grocery store shelves, including the death squads in Colombia for Chiquita banana, and I know about the drone strikes that my country commits, but I keep waking up and participating. This is why the transition is so necessary. We are holding each other in chains and instead need to lean on each other and build the communal tools to provide and protect the sharing of the resources that the earth provides, challenge and confront systems that we are forced to abide by through our unjust laws, and create the heaven on earth our souls know we were born to live in. I saw a KRS-One video recently where KRS-One said, "In the heart of every person is good, but we are all suffering from psychological disorders. We all have pain that we're carrying. Presidents cry too." So our ultimate challenge is to do the inner work and to look to each other as partners instead of competitors, to feel safe living in an environment where we don't have to be afraid of our neighbor, who is just a reflection of us. Eighth, finally, any legal victory is throwing the Zambian villagers a bone. As someone who was recently in law school and knows, one, how long these lawsuits take to come to a resolution, especially knowing the Vedanta and KCM Kafu River poison case went to the British Supreme Court, two, the completely arbitrary price tags legal teams, judges, and justices put on retroactive and forever life-changing damages, and three, the lack of future protections for communities, especially when Zambian legislators aren't able to sign a bill into law, which even if they did, to my knowledge, future victims would still need to go through a legal process and address the damages only after it's discovered that people have been affected from these mines. It's the very least a community could do. This is similar to the point I made about reframing the term human rights, because it shouldn't be a privilege to have the most basic redress, and it shouldn't even be redress in the first place, because people should have the power to stop these interactions at the source as soon as they happen. If it weren't for the systems of government and laws that protect the financial capitalist system, once again, transitioning to a mutual aid system would ensure that whatever we are producing, wherever and however much we are producing, is not going to tear apart our environment, and we can live symbiotically with all of nature around us. In conclusion, and again, this is dense, but the emphasis I'd like to leave for this episode is that an unfathomable scene of colonialism has sunk its teeth into Angola, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, again through the Lobito Corridor's Benguela Railway, under the veneer of green energy. The United States, the European Union, China, Anil Agarwal, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates, along with all of us, the complicit viewers and people of these countries, are standing by allowing Angola, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo to suffer insurmountable damage to lands, human rights violations, and continued exploitation for the profits of the already wealthy to continue subjugating the masses around the world. One person will not save us, but each of our actions will be key in creating a new future where we don't rely on subjugating other human beings in order to create a thriving community. Mutual aid, divesting and disconnecting from the current banking systems and governments we are currently in, and providing for our neighbors will provide the solutions we need to prevent a climate catastrophe. Not the law, not a president, not a corporation. Let me know if there was anything I missed that you can feel free to discuss in the comments, and also let me know where you disagree and where you think I could improve in these videos, because I'm just getting started and I want to make sure that I can provide stories, helpful analysis, and perspectives that can inspire critical thinking and inspire us to do the hard work to improve our lives and the lives of those who share this planet with us. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe or follow for more content, and I'll see you in the next one.